The film tells the story of a devout man who was once a hitman. He seeks redemption by eliminating the drug cartels he once served. But can he truly atone for his sins? MC Recap presents the story of Pardo, a religious man who regularly goes to church. One day, as Pardo entered the church, he noticed something unusual. From a distance, he saw a panicked man hiding something inside a flower pot. Suspicious, Pardo followed him to the harbor. There, he saw the man being confronted by 4 others demanding a bag filled with money. They interrogated him and repeatedly forced his head underwater by the shore. Although he was nearly beaten to death, the man insisted he knew nothing about the bag. When they failed to get answers, the 4 men left. Pardo then approached and realized the man was Augustine. Pardo also stepped in to help Augustine. Augustine asked him to take him to his friend Antonia's house. When they arrived, Antonia opened the door and let them in. Seeing Augustine's poor condition, she told her son to stay with his aunt. In reality, the boy was seriously ill and needed surgery to recover, but Antonia had to send him away for his safety. She feared that one day Augustine's enemies might come to her home and harm her son. Meanwhile, Pardo grew curious and asked about Augustine's prayer at the church. Augustine replied that he only wished for the men who attacked him to leave and never bother him again. To find peace of mind before continuing his work, Pardo paused for a moment and then left the house. When he returned, he performed a strange ritual with his gun, similar to Russian roulette. He loaded a single bullet, left the other 5 chambers empty, then aimed the gun at his head and pulled the trigger. If he survived, it meant he still had a chance at redemption by erasing the evil around him. But if Pardo died, his mission would end. That is why he was called the Redeemer. One afternoon, he went to the harbor and confronted the 4 men who had beaten Augustine the day before. From a distance, Augustine watched in fear. The fight was inevitable. With a small knife held between his fingers, Pardo swiftly slit the throat of one opponent. One of his enemies was even killed when his head was struck by the spinning blades of a boat engine. After defeating all his opponents, Pardo took their belongings and donated them to the church. On his way to Antonia's house, he saw several armed men gathered near the highway. Pardo immediately stayed alert, but they ignored him, showing that he was not the one they were after. When he arrived, Augustine begged Pardo to protect him from the gunmen. It was then that Pardo learned the bag of money Augustine had thrown away a few days earlier actually belonged to a drug lord. Pardo agreed to help Augustine on the condition that the money would be returned to its rightful owner. Augustine accepted. To keep them safe from the drug gangs, Pardo hid Augustine and Antonia in a cave on a deserted beach. He then risked his life by entering a drug cartel and offered to reveal the location of the bag they were after. However, Pardo set one condition: once they retrieved the bag, they had to leave the city. Their leader, Piedra, did not trust him immediately and wanted to verify Pardo's story first. With a gun pointed at him, Pardo revealed that the bag was hidden inside a church. Hearing this, Piedra and his men went straight there. However, after searching every corner, Piedra's men still could not find the bag. Furious, Piedra contacted the guards watching over Pardo and ordered them to kill him for lying. But before they could carry it out, Pardo struck first and launched into a fight. Alone, he battled many of Piedra's armed henchmen. Fortunately, Pardo won the fight and killed them all. Shortly after, Piedra returned home and was shocked to find all his men dead. He immediately went to his boss, Steve Braddock, to report what had happened. It turned out that Steve was the true owner of the bag. After wiping out Piedra's men, Pardo returned to the cave where he found Augustine and Antonia busy counting the money. At first, Pardo was stunned by what he saw. But he quickly realized that the bag Piedra had been searching for was taken back by Augustine, so Antonia could use the money to treat her sick son. Pardo tried to seize the bag. Antonia desperately tried to stop him, begging for the money, but Pardo ignored her. He was determined to return it to Piedra. However, along the way, he began to hesitate. He remembered his past with his wife and child. Pardo pulled over by the roadside to reflect. In the end, he returned to the cave and gave the money back to Antonia and Augustine. There, he once again performed his ritual of Russian roulette. Fortunately, the bullet did not fire and he survived. Sometime later, Pardo began monitoring the illegal operations of drug gangs. He studied every detail until one day he followed a car that led him to a drug factory. From a distance, he kept watching the activities inside. When the car he had tracked left the factory, Pardo got into his own vehicle and followed. Unexpectedly, he had walked right into a trap. Pardo's surveillance was exposed. As he crossed the road leading to a warehouse, his car was shot at. There, he confronted and fought a member of a drug cartel. His opponent was strong, forcing Pardo into a difficult battle. In the end, he defeated him with a deadly kick. That night, Pardo returned to the cave to rest. There, Antonia approached and invited Pardo to talk. When she touched his back, memories of his wife came rushing back. Years earlier, Pardo had been kidnapped along with his pregnant wife. At that time, she was tortured and screamed in agony by a man named Alacron, known as the Scorpion. He brutally disemboweled Pardo's pregnant wife right before his eyes. Alacron forced Pardo to choose, either kill his wife himself or watch her be tortured to death. Pardo was powerless, as he was tied up at the time. With a gun pressed against him, they forced a weapon into his hand and aimed it at his wife. In that desperate moment, unwilling to see her suffer any longer, Pardo was forced to pull the trigger. Back in the present, Pardo was seen driving toward the drug lord's headquarters. Meanwhile, at the hideout, Augustin tried to seize a boat docked at the harbor by diving into the water. He planned to use it to escape the city. But just as he managed to get on board, he was captured by Alacron's men. He dove back into the water to return to the hideout, but Alacron was already waiting nearby. At the same time, Pardo headed to a drug factory with his gun in hand. He shot down the guard at the gate and boldly stormed inside. A fierce gunfight erupted. When he reached one of the rooms, he encountered another guard and was forced into a hand-to-hand fight. His opponent fell after taking a series of powerful blows. Pardo then moved upstairs to the mafia boss's office. The room was a mess, with bullet casings scattered across the floor. He approached the chair where the boss sat motionless, sensing something was wrong. But before he could check, Alacron suddenly struck him hard from behind. Pardo was knocked unconscious and taken away. In his haze, he remembered the past when he once faced his greatest enemy, Alacron. In those days, Pardo had a forbidden profession, an assassin. He was hired to kill Alacron inside his own home. But because Alacron was too difficult to defeat, Pardo made a fatal mistake. During the struggle, Alacron's son suddenly ran out, just as Pardo fired his gun. The bullet struck the boy, killing him instantly. Seeing his only child die before his eyes, Alacron was consumed by rage and swore vengeance against Pardo. When Pardo regained consciousness, he found himself standing before a seaside church just as Alacron opened fire. Pardo saw Augustin and Antonia sitting nearby, terrified. Alacron threw a gun to Augustin and ordered him to take his own life. Antonia screamed in horror, and Alacron shot her in the leg. Taking advantage of the distraction, Augustin tried to turn the gun on Alacron. But Alacron noticed immediately and shot him in the head without hesitation. He then forced Antonia to pick up the weapon. Threatening her, he demanded she point it at her own head. Trembling and overwhelmed with fear, Antonia obeyed. In that moment of chaos, Pardo was reminded of his wife. With her last bit of courage, Antonia suddenly pointed the gun at Alacron. At the same moment, Pardo kicked Alacron's weapon away. The two then engaged in a hand-to-hand fight in front of the church. Both were evenly matched, exchanging powerful punches and kicks. After a long struggle, Pardo finally managed to defeat Alacron. Although still alive, Alacron was left powerless. Yet Pardo chose not to kill him. In the final scene, Pardo urged Alacron to repent and follow his path in fighting crime. He hoped that one day, after his death, Alacron could reunite with his son in heaven. The film ends with a message about the possibility of change within human nature. From Pardo's story, we learn that even a wrongdoer can change. Once a man who committed many crimes, Pardo eventually repented and returned to the right path after tragedy struck his life. Losing his loved ones did not drive him into hatred. Instead, he reflected on himself and chose to do good, seeking peace in his soul after accidentally killing a child and taking the life of his own wife. From Augustine's story, we learn that keeping something that does not belong to us will bring consequences. His refusal to return what he had found directly led to his tragic death.